Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining our BCSC School Board Candidate Forum. This forum is being co-hosted and moderated by the Columbus Educators Association and the Bartholomew County Retired Teachers Association. My name is Alan Birkemeier. I'm a middle school teacher, association representative, and will be moderating on behalf of CEA.
Hello, everyone. My name is Janice Montgomery, and I will be moderating on behalf of BARTA Retired Teachers. We are grateful to have all of our candidates participating tonight who are in attendance that you can see. And as a reminder, this is the second forum of the week. Tonight, the candidates are from districts 4 and 6, they are the ones joining us. Earlier this week, we heard from candidates in districts 1 and 2. Both forums will be uploaded to YouTube by the end of the week. That will be the CEA YouTube channel, and that will be ready for public view.
One quick update, Mark Douglas of District 6 declined to participate in tonight's forum. So before we begin, let's go over our rules. We will start with opening statements from candidates. All candidates will be given 1 minute. After that, we will begin asking candidates questions. While some questions will be asked to all candidates, others might only be asked to the candidates of specific districts. All candidates will be given 1 minute to answer the question asked of them. If candidates continue their remarks much longer than 1 minute, much longer than the 1 minute time limit, for the sake of time, we will mute them and move on.
Before we hear our opening statements tonight, we want to remind all viewers that the deadline to register to vote in the November election is Tuesday, October 11th. If you want to register to vote, or you just want to check on your registration status, go to indianavoters.in.gov/.
So without further ado, let's hear the opening statements from our candidates. Again, each candidate has 1 minute. We will begin with the candidates from District 4. Mr. Groh, will you please start us off?
Yeah, so I just want to take a minute to thank our host and thank CEA and the Bartholomew County Retired Teachers Association for putting this on. I think it's really important that our community hear our stances and our perspectives on some of these issues. And thank you to the community for taking the time to be a part of this too. So yeah, I'm Eric Groh. I'm a father of 3 alongside my lovely wife, Courtney. I believe that the education of our children is it's vitally important. It shapes the future of our culture and the future of our morals and our values. So that makes public education one of the most important institutions in our country. And the position of a school board also vitally important. So I'm excited to offer our community the option to vote for someone with a different experience for that position. So thank you for having me.
Thank you, Mr. Groh. Next, we will hear from Mr. Nowlin.
Hi, I'm Dale Nowlin, and I would also like to thank CEA and BARTA for hosting this. I moved to Columbus in 1985 for a teaching position at East High School. I taught at East for 2 years. I taught at Central Middle School for 10 years, and I taught at North High School for 23 years. For 21 of those years, I was the math chair at North High School and Northside Middle School. One of the things I did as math chair was make the schedule, and I always tried to give myself a wide variety of classes because I am a firm believer that every student counts, not just the highest achieving student, but every student. I have loved every single year of teaching because I've seen that education makes a difference in kids' lives. And I know that we are not successful with every kid, but my goal as a board member is to keep aiming at that success for every single kid in our district.
Janet, all right.
I'm having trouble. Am I on? Thank you to our District 4 candidates. I was listening so intently, I failed to get my voice going. We appreciate your opening statements. Next, we're going to hear from the candidates in District 6. First, we will hear from Ms. Dayhoff-Dwyer.
Thank you, Janice. Thank you, members of CEA and the Retired Teachers Association, for giving us and our community the opportunity to meet and listen to us. I have lived in our community since I was 3 years old. I am a graduate of Columbus North, as well as all 4 of my children. My background of 30 years is with emergency management and homeland security, and I have been a firefighter EMT for over 35 years. Fiscal responsibility, along with safety and security, has been one of my focuses while serving on the board, as well as serving as a voice of my constituents, teachers, and students. I also have a strong passion to be the voice of parents that have children with disabilities, and I want to keep them especially in the front of our conversation, as well as our teachers' needs. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dayhoff-Dwyer. Next, Mr. Schulz.
Yes, I'm Logan Schulz, and like others, I want to make sure to thank those that have been hosting and putting together this event. It provides us that ability for the public to see the differing views of the candidates before them this fall. As to my campaign and why I'm running for school board, first of all, I'm a parent of 4 BCSC children, which means I can empathize with many parents throughout this district that lived a long 2 years with many questions left unanswered. Second, I'm a 13-year product, kindergarten through high school of BCSC, which puts me in a unique position to have both the parent and the student view. Third, I have the experience necessary to bring both vision and direction to the board, as I'm currently a global workforce strategy executive with Amazon, which means I'm constantly deriving a vision and roadmap to execute on a plan. I collaborate daily with stakeholders, as I will here, while driving momentum forward. BCSC formed me into the professional that I am today, and if elected, I would support it just the same.
Thank you, Mr. Schulz. Last from District 4 will be Ms. Miles-Veith.
I'm actually from District 6, Janice, but thank you.
So sorry. I'm sorry.
That's all right. I just want to introduce myself, Cheryl Miles-Veith. I've been an educator for 35 years, 20 years in the classroom, 15 years outside of it as a behavior coordinator. I've worked with students of all disabilities and all grade levels. I've had a unique experience of also seeing how hard the administration works to implement strategies to help students in my position as coordinator. And I do thank Kathy Dayhoff-Dwyer, because I appreciate what you do on the board. I mean, and that's one of the reasons why I'm running, is that I feel like oftentimes we all sit in the background and say, well, you know, somebody should do something. And I thought, you know, it's time. I like serving as one of my calling, and that's why I'm doing this. And I also have 2 children who have been fortunate to graduate from the Columbus School Corporations and doing very well.
Thank you, candidates, for your opening statements. Let's jump into our first question. Over the last 2 years, many students did not grow academically as quickly as students in the past, as the COVID-19 pandemic, virtual learning, and economic issues took their toll. According to data collected by the CDC, existing inequalities in education were exacerbated during the pandemic, resulting in a widening achievement gaps between students of color and white students, LGBTQ+ students, and cisgender/heterosexual students, students learning English and native English speakers, and more. What do you think BCSC should do to minimize the performance gap that grew between different populations of students during the pandemic? We'll begin this time with candidates from District 6. Ms. Dayhoff-Dwyer, you'll start with you. Sorry, can't talk tonight.
That's okay. Thank you. The last 2 years have been really tough on parents and students. You know, the things that we have to look at is, first and foremost, the connectivity that was not available to every student in our community. That was a challenge. And, you know, the things that I think about as parents, nowadays, many of them are working 2 jobs just to, you know, to make it, and they're not teachers, and to help with homework. And some kids, they have a challenge at learning on the virtual learning. So I think getting back to the basics and getting the classroom and just understand that may take us a while to do a little catch up. But I think with everybody in the classroom with their peers and with the teacher support there, I think we'll be able to turn it around hopefully in the next year or so. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dayhoff-Dwyer. Next up, Ms. Miles-Veith.
Hi. I think looking at the COVID gap, that was a big concern for me reading that information. A few things that I think might actually be beneficial is smaller class sizes so that students can get more attention. One-on-one tutoring or small group instruction for our students who are really struggling and way behind are some things that should happen. But I'm also thinking, we know that so much of what affects our kids is outside of the school corporation. So making sure that we are working with the community to help assist them in meeting those things, whether it's mental health issues that we have, poverty, getting food for our kids who are in a food desert at times. So those are some of the things that I think I'd like to see focus on to help reduce that gap.
Thank you. Mr. Schulz, your thoughts?
Yes, and similar to others, I think a back to the basics approach is there. I feel students do their best when they feel both secure and heard, which means you have to meet them at where they are and support them in where they need to go. COVID had adverse impacts across the district. I was firsthand witnessing, and I believe targeting the investments into the small groups, into the classrooms where it's most needed, will equip to recover that gap is critical. Any strategy here, teachers and TAs are the front line to close education gaps. To do so, these groups means teachers need to be given the opportunity to work with students individually while also moving the classroom forward. The school board needs to ensure that we can hire and retain talented teachers. During this campaign, I've had concerning discussions with teachers around piling administrative-wide initiatives, deprofessionalizing the profession, and increasing financial stress. Where we invest our budget illustrates the priority, and to reduce education gaps at an individual level, that needs to be the teachers.
Thank you. Mr. Groh, what do you think BCSC should do to minimize the performance gap that grew between different populations of students during the pandemic? I believe you're muted there.
There we go. Come on now. Yeah, so there's so much to unpack in that question in 1 minute. It's almost inappropriate for me to kind of put it out there without explanation. But I'll do my best and maybe follow up sometime. But I think one focus we could do is to stop marginalizing, to really put our focus and attention on our students as unique individuals. And that's why where great teachers are so important, because they're on that level with our individual students where they can address those problems at that place. Our parent involvement, community involvement, that has to be a big factor in this. Our parents and community have to shoulder some of this responsibility if we're going to be successful at addressing a problem like that. And then we need to bring back the idea of the public square, where we can bring all of our competing ideas to a place and come up with our best ideas and implement those. And then I think we need to have the conversation about how much we're pointing our finger at COVID as the cause, and address how much of it is just the stressor that revealed the cause. But yeah, sorry in a nutshell. Yeah.
Thank you. Mr. Nowlin, you're up next. Gosh,
So I would like to start with two things that I think BCSC has done well post-pandemic. One is to use the federal COVID money to hire some new teachers on a 2-year temporary contract to reduce class sizes. It would be great if we could continue doing that, but at least we can do it to start. And the other is the counseling counts and bringing in outside counselors. And it was just perfect timing because there's such a high need for that. One thing I would add that I wished we had done is given teachers a curriculum day before the first day back, so that, just an example, 3rd grade teachers could talk to 4th grade teachers about what curriculum they didn't get done so they could adjust their curriculum. But two things that we continue to do that I think will continue to help with those gaps is our Universal Design for Learning initiative, which takes away barriers from learning, and our social and emotional learning, which helps kids to overcome barriers.
Thank you, candidates. For our next question, we're going to talk about something we all love, politics. There is no doubt there has been a renewed interest in public education from both sides of the political aisle. Nationally, many prominent Democrat and Republican politicians have espoused all sorts of opinions about public schools, some more flattering than others. And at the state level, some Indiana Republicans advanced a bill last year to make school board races partisan, which would have required candidates to run on a party ticket. Candidates, in this era of ever worsening political polarization, which political agendas do you see targeting our schools, and how would you keep them out of our schools? Mr. Nowlin, we'll let you start.
So I think the focus there should actually be students. That's the key to finding the common ground, I think. A good example for me of this, I served 2 terms on the National Assessment Governing Board, which was set by Congress. It oversees the nation's report card. I was one of 3 teachers, but there were a lot of political people on the board. Since it was set up by Congress, there was 1 Republican governor, 1 Democratic governor, same thing with state legislators. We had a common vision, and that was to learn what students know and can do and how to measure that. And we had disagreements, we had discussions, but it never became political because we kept looking at the vision of what can we do for the kids in terms of assessment. And I see this the same way. I would be glad to go up to Indianapolis and fight for kids, but it would be a matter of fighting for what's best for all kids.
Thank you, Mr. Nowlin. Mr. Groh. Mr. Groh, I believe you're on mute.
There it is.
Yes.
Yeah, so I agree. This topic has to stay as our kids first. I mean, this has to be about students and their growth first. Unfortunately, a lot of politics do get interjected into our public education, and it's inevitable. It's going to happen. So yeah, I mean, there are specific things around teachers union contracts, content in our libraries, which is a topic I've been vocal about. So there's a space for them for sure, but at the end of the day, we all have to have the mentality that this is about our kids first. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Miles-Veith, what political agendas do you see targeting our schools, and how will you keep them out of our schools?
Well, one of the ones that's targeting schools is book banning. And all of us are very passionate about our children because we love them and we want to guide them in the best path possible. My concern about book banning is that one person's idea of what's bad may not be the same for someone else. So then what we're going to do is restrict that access to everyone. I think it's an easy thing to do. If you don't want your child to have access to or read certain materials, then let the school know. They can put it down, and librarians can say, okay, sorry, you can't check that out. So that way we let access to the parents who want their children to have access to that. Critical race theory, it's not, I find that it's a moot point because we don't really discuss and teach critical race theory in our schools. But I do agree with everybody else. It's about what's best for kids to expand their mind, to let them become critical thinkers, and also become respectful of one another's different opinions.
Thank you. Mr. Schulz, your thoughts?
Yeah, and I mean, very similar to others centered around the child and their education. I always want to get that kind of environment where the children can get to that critical thinking and making sure that there is a safe space for them to learn and critically think outside of traditional partisan lanes. I don't believe that really politics needs to have a place in our education. However, recognize that from a funding perspective, it does. And so, making sure that we're working with our legislators and, removing the demonizing of teachers in some cases, and making sure that we're giving proper funding. And I've done this already in my past history on the DCS reform. I've co-founded Champions for Children, which passed legislation last year and has 12 legislations up for this next budget hearing. And so very used to doing that and making sure that getting around child safety and child education first.
Thank you. Last, Mrs. Dayhoff-Dwyer.
Thank you. I, like many, agree with what has already been said. I think the politics should stay out of our school system, given, the state Department of Education in the different rules that they pass on how we can, spend the budget, what we can do in all the paperwork with our teachers. We really need to focus on our kids and encouraging them to make their own minds and become leaders in our community. So I think as far as politics, there's not really a place yet, but it's good for them to know both sides. But it also leans on the parents to have their views shared with their kids. And that's a conversation that would be good for their kids and the parents to open the dialogue with their parents on their views and what they think about the politics. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, candidates, for your thoughts. We're going to shift gears and talk about the unknown, which is to say the future. In 2020, BCSC school board candidates were discussing quite different issues than they are now. Political issues can change fast, and what was important one year will fade into the background by the next year. It very well may be that the issues that the school board candidates campaign around now will give way to brand new, as of yet unknown issues in the next year or two. Even if they don't, if you are elected to the school board, you will be faced with an issue at some point with you are unfamiliar. Our question is this: when an unfamiliar topic comes up during your term, how will you gather information about it? And which stakeholders will you prioritize? Let's begin with Ms. Miles-Veith.
I think that it really kind of depends on the topic. If it's something that when we're talking about the shortage of teachers or whatever down the line, how do we do that? Then the teachers getting their input. I think you have to get a lot of people's input just because education affects everybody. It really, there's not one group in this community that it doesn't affect. So trying to be as open as possible and giving access for their views, knowing that in the end, we still have to make the best decision for the students. And it may be that it's an unhappy decision with the public, but if it's best for the students, we're still going to do that. So also though, we have access to a lot of information out there. And so constantly checking different on the internet, different areas of information so that we have as much as we possibly can to make the best decision.
Thank you, Ms. Miles-Veith. Next up, Mr. Schulz.
Yeah, I mean, anytime I look at an area of unknown, I really look through the area of my core beliefs. And so like when I look at it from an education perspective, it's going to be child safety, child education, and making sure we're doing the best by them. And so I'll seek out guidance from those that have experience. I'm the first person to say, I don't know what I don't know. And so you have to get people where they are. So if we're talking about teacher shortages, you need to have conversations with teachers, see the classroom. We're not all going to have that ability and that experience to bring. So we have to get into that. If it's a financial thing that happens to be more my background, then we can dive deep and understand the financials. And if it's just a general disagreement, understanding where the commonalities overlay and making sure that we're, being constructive and building dialogue off of that. Doesn't mean we have to always be unanimous, but as long as we're being constructive, that's going to allow us to build around our children and make sure the education's best going forward.
Thank you, Mr. Schulz. Ms. Dayhoff-Dwyer, your thoughts.
Thank you. Yes, I believe gathering information to identify specifically what the problem is and doing kind of an assessment and really find the root problem. Talking to the subject matter experts in that, whether it's, gathering more from other school corporations to see what they're doing or what may be working with them. Obviously, talking to our teachers, engaging our parents. They are a big role in their child's education and really trying to identify what that problem is. And is it really a big problem or is it something that is small enough that we can really just mitigate very quickly without getting changing everything. Sometimes it's something that may be needed to be changed in one area and not all areas. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dayhoff-Dwyer. Mr. Grow, when an unfamiliar topic comes up during your term, how will you gather information about it and which stakeholders will you prioritize?
Yeah, so something I do in running a business, I come across that problem often. And, I think it's really important to seek out the people who do have the answers, seek out the experts, seek out people who have knowledge that's relevant to that, especially peers. And then once you do that, then seek out 2 or 3 more with competing ideas, so you can really take in different perspectives, ideas that compete with themselves, so that you can assess that through what you know and through your morals and values to come up with the best decision. But ultimately on this, I think it always all comes back to, like, you have to filter this through, like, we're doing what's best for our students. So in situations that are unfamiliar, that's the top priority.
Thank you, Mr. Grow. Last, Mr. Nowlin.
And so first I have to put on my math teacher hat and say I would focus on identifying the problem to begin with and research around what is the actual problem, because sometimes what appears to be the issue or the problem isn't always what's underlying. Beyond that, I firmly believe in listening to all stakeholders. So that would be students, staff, administration, parents and families, and the community. And also looking into research. So my background undergraduate is in psychology, and my master's has a lot of statistics. So when I do a Google search and it says, do you want the academic articles on this, I'm not afraid to check those out. Some things are new, but many things we deal with in education, there has been good research on best practices, and I would rely on that as well.
Thank you to all candidates for sharing their thoughts. Now let's talk about school funding. Specifically, we'd like to ask you about the BCSC's most recent local referendum. The referendum that passed in 2020 was specifically geared toward increasing educator pay and school safety. Eventually, it will need to be reauthorized by both the school board and the community. And if you are on the school board at that time, you will be voting on whether or not to put the referendum before the community once again for its renewal that time. Did you support the referendum before, and would you support a future referendum for educator pay and the needs of the district? This time we'll start with Mr. Nowlin.
So I absolutely supported the referendum the last time. And would I support it the next time? My hope or dream would be that the state would actually fund education so we wouldn't have to repeat the referendum. But assuming that wouldn't happen, I think the referendum is a good way to get it out there to voters and see, do they want to support it? I think one reason the last referendum was so successful was that it focused on salaries for teachers and staff, and I really appreciated that aspect of that.
Thank you. Next, Mr. Grow.
Yeah, so if I were elected to the board and we ended up in a position where we had to go ask our already overtaxed taxpayers to pay more taxes for something as important as giving our teachers a raise, I would just feel like I failed miserably. Our teachers are the most important part of educating our kids in our school system. And, it's important that we budget appropriately, that we prioritize what's important in our budget. So, if we need to go to ask our taxpayers to pay more, we should be asking them to pay for the things at the bottom of that priority list on the budget, not the thing at the top. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Schulz.
Yes. So going back, yes, I did support it in the prior election. I think going forward, though, I wouldn't start with a referendum, right? I'd look within our budget, see what opportunities exist within the budget to address it. If that flexibility doesn't exist, then I'd look at what opportunities exist to increase funding, whether that's be grants, corporate community investments, or advocating on behalf of public education for state house funding, like discussed earlier. If none provide to cover the shortfall, then yes, moving forward with a referendum to the voters on increasing teacher salaries is appropriate. Again, on Monday, I posed this question in the public budget hearing of why the budget's essentially asking teachers to take a 5% buying power pay cut next year. And so I think we got to make sure we have our priorities, like Mr. Groh said, at the top. And going back to that last question, how is that going to produce better results or close gaps, how we talked about on the education side, if we just pile on further financial stress? So ultimately, yes, I would support it.
Thank you. Ms. Dayhoff-Dwyer, I'll restate the question. I should have done that for Mr. Schulz. I apologize. Did you support the referendum before, and would you support a future referendum for educator pay and the needs of the district?
Absolutely, I supported the referendum before because it's not my money. It's the community's money. It's the taxpayer money, and only they know what they can afford and what they can't afford. We were fortunate that the referendum did pass, and I know it probably did bring some hardship on some families, but what we have done on the current board is that the state and legislation only allows teacher salary to be paid out of a certain budget piece. And it's not, and so when you are only allowed, and then you have the students' ADM rates of each child that comes to school brings a certain amount of money, that's kind of where our teacher salary ends up coming from. So, our hands are a little bit tied. But that's not to say that we can't work with it. And yes, I would support the referendum again. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dayhoff-Dwyer. Ms. Miles-Veith, would you finish for us, please?
Yes, I supported it. And I'm assuming that the only reason why we would be putting a referendum forward again is because we need the money. We don't have it. The state continues to, just this year and next year, they've increased their student spending 4.6% this year and 4.3% next year, but they're not going to continue that. They have said 45% must go towards teacher salaries. I will tell you that, when you're looking at teachers and we talk about this teacher shortage, this is a nationwide shortage. It's not going away soon. So there's not a lot to pick and choose. I've had principals tell me that normally they would get 50 to 100 applicants, and they're lucky if they get 3 now. So if we truly want our kids to have the best teachers, then we're going to have to do something that gets them excited about being here, besides just the fact that we're a wonderful community and we have a lot of people who support it, just like all the people who are running for this office. So yes, we have to make sure that we have the money to pay them.
Thank you, candidates, for sharing your thoughts on the referendum. Our next question will focus on curriculum and the programs that BCSC offers to its students. Both nationally and locally, there's been renewed focus on school curriculum and programs every year. BCSC goes through an extensive curriculum and resource adoption program for a different subject. And administration is always coming up with programs which are helpful to our students and which are not. Wait, sorry, I think I read that wrong. Sorry, let me restart that. Every year, BCSC goes through an extensive curriculum and resource adoption program for a different subject. And administration is always considering which programs are helpful and to which students are, and which are not, to helpful to students and which are not. I apologize, everybody, I'm doing a very bad job. At least one candidate has spoken out against diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI programs, though other candidates have emphasized the importance of multiculturalism and diversity in their campaigns. Candidates, which specific programs in BCSC do you consider to be a problem? If there are none, could you please speak to the one that you like and explain why you like it? And my students who are watching would be very upset if I didn't say be specific, be specific. That's what I always tell them. So be specific. All right, so anyway, we'll start this time with Mr. Groh. Mr. Groh, you've said publicly that you are opposed to DEI. To which specific programs in BCSC are you referring? And what is your objection to it?
Yeah, so I mean, to give that some context, my whole reason for running and my platform for this is the need for us to start having conversations publicly. So, I did that. I understood what I was doing when, I made public comments on that. And I did that in the name of starting a conversation. Like, I believe we just need to be talking about these things. So, DEI initiatives in general, I do have some criticisms for. I want to have those conversations. I'm not trying to stand here and say I have the answer, but I just see the need for a lot more communication, transparency with parents so that we can come together as a community to do that. And, just to be frank and specific, I have the same issue with SEL, that I see some counter arguments to these philosophies that need to be had by our community. And yeah, 1 minute is just not enough to cover topics like these, but hopefully more to come. Thanks.
Okay. So again, which specific program did you have a problem with? I'm sorry, my internet was cutting in and out there.
Yeah, so me bringing up DEI was more about the general idea of we need to start having a conversation. So DEI and SEL are both always topics at our school board meetings with regard to, specific programs at schools, like when we do best practices and stuff like that. And my whole point with all of that, since you called me out on it, was just to start the conversation, to say, hey, I just saw someone needed to stand up and say, hey, let's have that public square where we can all come to the table with different ideas and have the discussion, and we'll all be better for it, no matter how that ends up.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Nowlin.
So there aren't any programs that have come to mind that I would want us to drop at this point, or that I'm opposed to, but I would like to address the social emotional learning aspect. I actually first heard about social emotional learning when I was at a National Assessment Governing Board meeting in Minneapolis, and I hadn't heard anything about it here at BCSC at that point. They had a full-time social emotional learning person who helped teachers bring it into their classroom, into their curriculum. It's actually a good example of where we need transparency, because there's so much misunderstanding around it. This is going to be paraphrased, but it's really about getting kids to understand their emotions, control their emotions, be aware of other students' emotions, work on social skills, and make good decisions. It's not about changing our culture, and it is a huge help in closing those achievement gaps that we talked about before. So I would love to actually see more teacher training on bringing it into our curriculum on a daily basis.
So as a follow-up, just to be clear, that is one that you feel is important for BCSC, and that BCSC is doing well, or one that needs to be improved?
Both. I think we're doing well, but I think that we can, what I heard about social emotional learning is it's something that happens in advisory, but it actually should be something that happens if a math teacher is working with kids in groups, what a perfect time to teach them about how to work with other people. So it's incorporated into our curriculum, and kids would benefit. So both. We're doing a good job. We need to do a better job.
Thank you. Ms. Dayhoff-Dwyer, same question. If you'd like, I'll repeat it.
No, I got it. Be specific in that there is not one that comes to mind right away. However, I do want to mention that a couple of school boards ago, we had an elementary, and I just kind of lost it, probably nerves, but that brought a couple of kids into the board meeting, and they were actually talking about how to get along with everybody, respect, social. You hurt my feelings. Why did you say it that way? Could you not, and they would call them out, and they had a circle time, and it was really awesome. And to see that, and I think it will grow because it was their best practice. The other thing that I think we do well at BCSC is because we are very, very rare in the state of Indiana that we do full inclusion with our kids with disabilities. And there's been a number of studies done that say that kids do well with their peers. And I want this program to continue and bloom into after high school with the transition with IUPUI and Ivy Tech. And that's where we're going to go with it. Sorry, I had to go over.
Thank you. Ms. Miles-Veith, your thoughts?
Actually, as my background has been a teacher for students with emotional or behavior disorders for many years. So the social emotional training and work that we're doing is what I really think is important. We need to help kids recognize their feelings, but also to learn to respect other people's feelings, so that we can start that process of teaching people that you can disagree but still respect one another. And I think we've kind of lost that in many ways in society. Also, full inclusion. I'm working with the kids with special needs. It's not only benefits them, it benefits the kids in the general ed, because they learn to be leaders. They learn how to work together and to have a better understanding of why somebody has this behavior or this. So it's just a wonderful program, and we do those pretty well, but we can always work on them doing better.
Thank you. Last, Mr. Schulz.
Yeah, Miss Dayhoff-Dwyer kind of got me with the restorative out of Smith. That was where I was kind of going as well as an idea, but I don't have anything off the top of my head that I can say is on a negative side. I think what I would say is I see a lot of pockets of innovation with a lack of scaling across the network. And that's something that I would like to see better. What comes to mind when I say that is we got the Legato program over at Clifty. I've got multiple family members in there, but it doesn't seem to be scaling to that vision. That's where I see the board taking that opportunity. My daughter's in teams at Southside. Again, it's creating children to learn in a non-traditional way to gain better outputs, but again, pocketed in Southside. And similar with project-based learning at CSA, we've had all these opportunities across the district, but we haven't harnessed it and scaled it throughout our corporation. And I think that's where the failure lies, is how do we bring that to the vision and making sure that BCS is the choice for education in our area.
Thank you, candidates, for your thoughts on very specific programs in BCSC. Multiple candidates have said their goal is to increase parental control in public schools. Precisely how differs from candidate to candidate, but that isn't the only thing that differs. Bartholomew County is quite diverse, and precisely what parents want to see from the schools differs widely depending on whom you're speaking with. In many cases, one parent wants the exact opposite of what another one seeks to have happen. So candidates, how are you going to balance the competing interests among your parents, the school parents, and the community members? We're going to start with Ms. Cheryl Veith.
Well, I think first off, if talking about parents having more input and control, is we do it by voting. So listening and accessing this information is one of the ways that we in our democracy get to have that input. The other is, I think, at one time, and I don't know if it's still, I have to say, I don't know, I had asked someone else if the Parent Advisory Council was still going on, because I think we do need to have that input. I valued as a teacher the people who knew this child best, which was the parent. Again, I don't think that we can, I want to be careful that it's not just representative of one group, a small group. I wanted to make sure that as getting parent information, that we're getting it from a wide variety of our clientele, so that everybody has that voice, and being open to listening, whether it's having maybe outside meetings that aren't board meetings, so that parents have access to us.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Miles-Veith. Mr. Schulz.
Yeah, great question. I'd say similar to any area of conflict in life, whether that's business or personal, you have to look at where that overlap of those interests lies. Rather than highlighting on the differences, I look to identify those core items that both sides share and build off that foundation. As you build off that foundation, I collaborate with both sides equally to earn both sides' trust and ensure that the sides know that they're being heard. I think communication's key. In the end, you paint a vision that both sides share a common core belief, like strong education, child safety, and then you bring the best options around from their perspective. Constructive disagreement and dialogue are what drives innovation, which is what a BCSC school board should want. Unanimous decisions are easy because you don't have to have that perceived tough dialogue. However, then your schools fail to innovate, and that results in students not being prepared for the workforce of tomorrow. It's the board's responsibility to probe and create that constructive dialogue with the administration and making sure that BCS is that choice for education.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. Ms. Dayhoff-Dwyer.
Could you repeat the question this time?
Yes, I'm sorry. It has been a little bit since the question. Do you need the preface or just the question?
Just the question.
Okay. How will you balance competing interests among parents and community members?
I believe that engaging the parents is a challenge. You know, when you're out and about we attend athletic events, and even as far as going to the grocery store, you know, different things like that. I run into different people. Also, just we have to do a better job as a board to get that information out. We use several, you know, technology. We try to send things home with their kids, but it's also communications is a two-way street. There's a sender and a receiver. And, you know, when my kids were in elementary, we had a book that we had to sign every night to know that we saw the assignments in it. And we wrote notes back to the teacher in it. So we had an ongoing communications. And I think, you know, we need to develop a way to improve that communications and to maybe be available either half hour before the board meetings, or we can always stay after the board meetings for people to come and interact with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dayhoff-Dwyer. Mr. Nowlin, how would you balance the competing interests among parents and community members?
So I would say the key there is that my role as a board member would be to listen. One thing about the current format of the board and the public input part, and I know this is probably frustrating to everybody, but when I've been there over the years, it's like people are saying something, but it's kind of like talking to a wall. We need some kind of place where if we're going to really listen for understanding, we have to be able to question and dialogue back and forth. And the goal in that, for my part, would not be to come up with an answer or here's my opinion or here's why you're wrong. My goal would be to understand where they're coming from. And the other piece of that is the input from parents and community. You did say community there, and I think we need to do a much better job of communicating with our community. A lot of people pay for schools that don't have kids in school, and they have a right to know and be heard too. But then you put all that together and look at other sources and make the best decision you can.
Thank you, Mr. Nowlin. Last, Mr. Groh.
Yeah, so I think this is a very deep question and a great one and a challenging one, but I think we have to bring back the idea of the public square. We have to really put effort forth to bring back strong community. And the reason we have to do that is because there's a vital mechanism, you know, for society that that we use to bring about our best, where we can bring all those best ideas to the table, competing ideas, because not only do we get the opportunity to you know, assess and the best ideas rise to the top, but a really amazing thing happens where we can take parts of different ideas. We gain perspective that we never would have had we not participated in that process. And then we get to create an idea that's immeasurably better than any of the individual ideas on their own. So we have to facilitate that. We have to remove barriers for our community. We have to give them more access. We have to have, you know, real inclusion for our community in our schools. And I think that is mainly through our school board. Thank you.
Thank you, candidates, for sharing your thoughts. We have 2 questions left, and then we will be hearing closing statements from our candidates. Our next question is similar to the last one, but this time we're going to get more specific. The Indiana School Board Association urges all school board members in its code of ethics to remember that it's their duty to represent all parts of the school community. Even though some of you are running intending to represent specific perspectives, the community does ultimately expect that all school board members will set aside differences and work together to help students grow. No matter what positions or topics that you personally consider to be important, you will have community members, maybe even many in the community, that will firmly disagree with you. As a school board member, on which issues do you anticipate some of the community disagreeing with you? And how will you make sure to continue to represent their concerns? Mr. Groh, we'll start with you this time.
Oh, on the spot on that one. I mean, obviously my questioning of, some of the ideologies in our school is going to be a hot button issue for sure. The content in our libraries is obviously a hot button issue. I'm well aware of all this stuff. Yeah, but when I go into a disagreement like that, I have the mentality that that person across from me probably knows something that I don't know, that if I did know, would make me better, would improve my perspective. And if we all do that, I mean, that's how we really, build upon each other as a community. So, that's how I would approach those situations, is like, hey, I'm going to articulate my argument and present it to you. And then I'm going to listen and pay attention intently to your argument and until I can understand your perspective. And hopefully you're doing that with me also. And that's how we build and how we're constructive and have real progress. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Groh. Mr. Nowlin, your thoughts?
So first of all, I would hate to predict what those areas might be, because 4 years ago, I don't think anyone imagined that the hot topic would be masks. But I would say it just goes back to listening with understanding and not going into it with my set opinion, because it's possible that I could be convinced otherwise. But the key is to listen to all sides, especially if it's an issue with just two sides. I think it's too easy to jump onto one bandwagon or the other instead of really listening to where they're coming from. And I've been told I'm a good listener.
Thank you, Ms. Nowlin. Ms. Veith, on which issues do you anticipate some of the community disagreeing with you, and how will you make sure to continue to represent their concerns?
A couple of things probably on, teacher salary and teacher retention, that we do need to pay teachers way more than what they are getting paid now. And it's been a problem. When I was teaching, we had people leave to Seymour school corporations because they were going to make a $5,000 to $6,000 jump in pay. And these were really good, experienced teachers. So we've got to figure out that if you want quality, you have to pay for it. The other thing is probably, possibly the book banning. And again, my solution is that they just tell the school, my child can't have access to these, and we can work to keep them out of that. I think the important thing is you do listen, but I also think it's also important to ask them, tell me what you think is the solution. Because if they want to complain about something, it's best if we can find out that they have a solution or ideas, we can maybe work better with that than just a complaint.
Thank you, Ms. Miles-Veith. Mr. Schulz.
Yeah, I mean, I would try to jump on what predicting, but overall, I mean, I think the area where I probably will get the most rub will be just driving accountability and asking those tough questions and like making sure that the structure's set up appropriately to the behavior you want. Like right now, the teacher salary structure incentivizes growth from within, but the growth from external isn't there in terms of the salary structure. So how are we going to attract that talent from other school districts? And very similar to like what Ms. V said, Seymour is higher. And so I could see that area of being an area of contention. In the school board meeting during the public budget hearing, it was brought up that, we're below state averages on investing. I challenged back, how can we consistently be below state average on investing while expecting above state average results? We're in the bottom 50th percentile in proficiency in math and reading. We're in the bottom 50th percentile for graduation rates. And this isn't the direction. I'd rather invest more if that's what's going to have to get those results, because at the end of the day, our society is better with a solid education system.
Thank you, Mr. Schulz. Last, let's hear from Miss Dayhoff-Dwyer.
Thank you. I would say that there's, like everyone have spoke on, whether it's a mask or the book banning, or, I think the biggest push is that I've always, for the years I've been on the board, have always continued to listen to the constituents. I am not going to vote for what I personally think should happen. And a prime example was when we had to redistrict Southside and Mount Healthy. I had a lot of people contact me both ways. And even though I knew it was the right thing to do, we really needed to do it. I had hundreds of people ask me to vote no. And I did go against our constituents or my board colleagues on that. So, I'm open. I want to learn and I want to listen. And really, it comes down to what's best for our students, their safety and their education. Thank you.
Thank you to all the candidates. We are now at the final question of the evening, and then we will hear closing statements from each candidate. We wanted our final question to be one that ended us on a positive note. The candidates, we are asking you, will you please share with us something you believe BCSC is doing well? And in general, the things you appreciate about our public school system here in Bartholomew County. Mr. Schulz, would you start with us, please, for us, please?
Awesome. I got to go first on this one. So overall, I think the one that I would highlight as a former North graduate is the C4 program. There's a lot of opportunities where we push college education. It may not be appropriate. Like I said, I'm a workforce strategy executive within the maintenance arm of Amazon. And we've got a lot of great career opportunities in the STEM that don't require college degrees. And I think giving the students that ability to be a part of the workforce even like a trial by error is a great opportunity for them. Anytime when we challenge the students to get outside their comfort zone and move through that, I think those are the greatest opportunities you can give young adults at that point in their lives. And so I think that would be the one area that I would focus on going forward.
Thank you, Mr. Schulz. Next, Ms. Dayhoff-Dwyer.
Thank you. I would say there's several. Our Legato program, C4's dual credit college credit program that we have within our high schools, nationally recognized project-based learning at CSA, STEM programs, iGrad, and one that is very near and dear to my heart is how we at BCSC with inclusion with our kids with disabilities. But one thing that I'm probably most excited about is that we're kind of dipping our toe in the water. Like I said earlier, it's the transition after high school into with Ivy Tech partnership with Ivy Tech and IUPUC with our kids to get them out and about. And we have a new 501(c)(3) that's out there that's called REACH. We have an unemployment issue in Bartholomew County. And I tell you, we have a lot of kids that can work at different employment places. And this is the way that we're going to get them to be independent and to be out there and strong.
Thank you, Ms. Dayhoff-Dwyer. Ms. Miles-Veith, would you follow up?
I actually like the diversity we have as far as programs in the elementary schools, whether we have the Legato, the CSA. I'd like to see more of that because it gives parents options. Kids don't all learn the same. So this is providing a different avenue for the kids to learn and what's best for them. I think universal design for learning has a lot of good positive points to it, and that we're trying to reach kids where they are and find out what's the best way for them to learn. PBIS, positive behavioral instructional support, recognizing and helping kids to let them know, pointing out when they are doing well, but also then teaching them the right behavior on how to handle your emotions more appropriately, which makes them better opportunities in the workforce, because that's what we're looking for. So yeah, I think there's a lot going on there for a lot of parent choice that we didn't have when my kids were growing up.
Thank you, Ms. Miles-Veith. Now, Mr. Nowlin, will you please share with us something you believe BCSC is doing well and in general you appreciate about our public school system in Bartholomew County?
So I'm going to cheat and talk about three. I actually the two that first came to mind were iGrad and Counseling Counts, because I think they're great examples of our school corporation working with our community to make a difference. But for the last 3 weeks, I have been doing a long-term sub for a special ed teacher, and I cannot say enough about how effective our special ed program is. And you can see I get emotional about it. The inclusion is amazing, and the teachers and the TAs work together. They work with the classroom teacher, they work with counselors, they work with speech and hearing folks. They are just always on the move, and they do tremendous support for our kids. In terms of inclusion, I will never forget, several years ago, we had a group of teachers visiting our math classes from Elkhart, and I sat in with them on a class. The kids were working in groups and they were talking about that, and they said afterwards, that was great, but how's it work for special ed kids? And I said there were 10 special ed kids in that class, and they did not know it.
Thank you, Mr. Nowlin. Last, we'll hear from Mr. Grow.
Yeah, so for me, this is hands down just the opportunity that BCSC offers. From the variety of classes students can choose from, to the accelerated education programs, to programs like C4, project-based learning, and the emphasis we have on STEM, the vast clubs and sports programs. This is something that my wife and I are very appreciative of and not used to, I guess. So that's one of the reasons why we actually seeked out Columbus and chose to raise our family here. Thank you.
Thank you for your thoughtful answers, candidates. Lastly, we'd like to hear closing thoughts from each candidate. You will have 1 minute each to make your closing statements. Mr. Nowlin, your closing thoughts, please.
Great. I'm trying to compose myself, and we start with me. So I have 3 kids that went through BCSC, but I am not doing this for them. I've had thousands of students that go through BCSC, and I am not doing this for them. I read a book a couple years ago by Robert Putnam, and he talked about how our culture has changed its views about how we see education, and it has turned so much more into about my kids and your kids. The title of the book is Our Kids, and that's why I'm doing this, because I see this as education is important for our kids as a community, and this is my way to continue to support those kids, because if those kids get a good education, then that helps our community. I'm going to steal a favorite quote here from the former superintendent of schools in Illinois. He says, "It is vital for the common good that we have uncommonly good public schools." And that's my goal.
Thank you, Mr. Nowlin. Mr. Grow, your final thoughts, please.
Yeah, so I got to start with another thank you. Just thank you guys for hosting a thoughtful and cordial forum. Thank you to the community again for participating. If there was anything that I wasn't clear on, or you want to know more about, or maybe a topic we didn't discuss, please go to my Facebook page, go to my website up there, send me a message. It'll be me responding, and I want to talk to everybody. And then just, I think, it might be appropriate for me to take this time to clarify, some of the rub that got brought up with some of the things that I've said about like self, for example, some of these ideologies. I'm not suggesting that these ideologies are all bad. These principles are all bad, but there are some things like with self, for example, it lacks any kind of operational validity because we're not rigidly defining things. So, that's an example. And another one is it pushes compromise a lot. And, I don't want my children compromising on everything, but I'm going to post some stuff with regard to that just to further explain it, because, I'm not the enemy. I'm not your enemy. I want to hear from other people and come up with our best ideas on topics like this. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Grow. Ms. Miles-Veith, your last thoughts, please.
Hi, and thank you all for hosting this. Really appreciate it. And I just want to say that it's nice to see and to be with a group of people that, while we may be all running for positions, to know that we truly passionately care about the kids, and that's obvious here tonight. And so it's wonderful to be among all of you. My feeling why I'm running is I believe the school boards role is really to develop policies that will help students, but that also means those policies have to make sure that they are giving the teachers these skills, the strategies, the support that they need to be able to have their kids grow. And I want to make sure that we're doing that. I think we also don't realize that how valuable teachers are. My experience with one kid was that she was an adult and she came up to me and said, "Mrs. Veith, I bet you don't remember me." And I said, "Oh, I absolutely do." And she said, "Thank you." And I said, "For what?" Because I didn't feel like I was really doing as good a job as I wanted. And she said, "Because you were telling me all the right things. I just wasn't ready at that time, but I use them now." And that's the kind of impact I hope to have on the school board too.
Thank you, Ms. Miles-Veith. Mr. Schulz?
Yeah, I mean, again, like the others, thanks so much for hosting this. I think it gives a lot of opportunity for various perspectives, and it's clear that everyone here cares a lot about the future. I think why I'm running and what I think I can bring is you're going to get someone who paints a vision and make sure that we move to that vision and make sure that we have a structure that's centered around our students and our teachers to make sure that we're equipping them to do the job that we need them to do and be professionals and treat them like professionals and equipping them like professionals. And so, I mean, you'll definitely get that. You'll get the accountability. You'll get the challenging questions. Just like I asked the school board this past week about why are our teachers taking a discretionary pay cut in the budget? We're not gonna move forward by underinvesting and expecting above state average results by below average investments. And so challenging questions will come, and I think that's what I'll bring as a change agent and support it around our students to move BCSC forward.
Thank you, Mr. Schulz. Ms. Dayhoff-Dwyer?
Well, thank you. And it is awesome to hear everybody's views, and I appreciate everybody's time tonight. I have been the voice of my constituents for a number of years, so I'm not afraid to disagree with my colleagues that I serve on the board with me. I take every concern seriously. Many nights I come home, just rethinking things and how we can make it better. And I think people that know me know that I try to do my very best and I'm a fixer. I want to fix everybody's problems. So teacher salaries, student safety, and inclusion of all students, along with working to improve the communications with families. That's why I am running. We are a village, and it takes everyone to build a strong public education for all. I would appreciate everyone's vote in this election and want to thank everyone that has given me support over the years. We have awesome teachers, we have TAs, support staff, and over the last several years of serving and representing you on this BCSC board, I appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dayhoff-Dwyer. We want to thank all the candidates tonight from districts 4 and 6 who have joined us. And before we leave, we want to remind everybody of some very important upcoming dates. So first of all, if you wish to vote in the upcoming election, the deadline to register is quickly approaching. So if you want to check your registration to see if it's accurate or register to vote, you need to go to indianavoters.in.gov/. Don't delay. The deadline is quickly approaching.
Don't forget that Election Day is right around the corner. Early in-person voting begins Wednesday, October 12th and continues to Monday, November 7th. Election Day is Tuesday, November 8th, and we hope everyone is planning on voting.
And if you haven't already, we want you to make your plan to vote. Decide now, are you voting early? Or are you going to vote on Election Day? If you're voting on Election Day, plan now when you will go to vote. Will you go before work? Will you go on your way home, during your lunch break, or some other convenient time to you?
Last, if you missed our election forum earlier this week with candidates from districts 1 and 2, don't worry, we recorded it. And that forum, along with tonight's, will be uploaded to YouTube by the end of the week. Subscribe to the Columbus Educators Association on YouTube or follow us on Facebook to see the videos once they're available. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us tonight.
We hope you all have a great evening, and don't forget to vote.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, candidates.